you. Well, with me now is Hannah Weisfeld, who's director of Yachad, which is a UK-based non-governmental organisation which describes itself as pro-Israel and pro-peace. Thank you very much for coming in, Hannah. Are you confident that the way things are going at the moment with peace plan talks on one side and now this 12-hour window at least of a ceasefire?
I think it's a very tough moment, and it's difficult to tell to what extent either populations are committed to it and really want it. I think that what's interesting about this round of conflict is that the level of intensity, the level of vitriol that's spilled out of the region actually around the conflict has been worse than I've ever witnessed before. And I hear that from people here, I hear it from people in the region. I think right now the most important thing is that international actors, whether that's the EU, European Union, the UN, America obviously, but also particularly the constituency that I represent, which is a British Jewish constituency, raise their voices as loudly as possible to say we have to get behind peace. And actually, a short-term humanitarian ceasefire is hugely important in the immediacy, but we will be back in this conflict again and again and again if there is not a long-term negotiated solution.
The thing is, we have been in this again and again, haven't we? I mean, Egypt, even today, their foreign ministry is saying that Israel has to learn to deal with the issue of reconciliation in a more positive way. What do you make of that comment?
Look, I think it applies to both sides. I think that, your point that we have been here again, and I think, we could be on repeat from Cast-led 5 years ago. This is the same news story. I think that the problem we have is that each time this round of conflict happens at this level of intensity, the populations get further away from peace. And the international community gets more frustrated and more angry because the reality is that there is perceived wisdom that everybody knows how this conflict is going to be solved. Everybody knows that there will be a two-state solution, that it will be based on 67 borders, and they seem unable to get there. So I think that the challenge we have is how do you build support in the region and outside of the region for what are very difficult steps that have to be taken. But what we saw previous to this month was the failure of the Kerry Initiative and total despair. And you saw America back away and say, we're going to leave you to it, and this is what we find ourselves in today. And so actually, I'm very much in the business and the work I do of saying to people, we can't stay silent. You cannot stay silent when there is a conflict raging and about long-term peace.
But the problem with trying to reconcile this now, though, is given the number of deaths and how far apart these communities will be, because there's a lot of pain on both sides.
Huge amount.
How do you bridge that? I mean, diplomacy is only going to go so far, but on the ground, the feelings will be high and they will be really deep.
Yeah, and I think that in addition to that, there is a humongous lack of trust, huge lack of trust. And, and I think that I can only imagine that the people of Gaza perceive Israel and Israelis to be people that they could never live side by side. And I think equally, particularly if you live in the south of Israel, but if you live all over Israel, this sense of how can we have these people on our borders that are digging tunnels underneath our country. I think that actually what you have to do is have confidence building measures. There has to be a way for the international community to support both parties in creating confidence building measures that bring them closer together again, because without those, the ability of anyone to enforce a resolution on either party, which will be long term, I think is highly unlikely when there are so many spoilers out there right now that don't trust anyone.
Just briefly, do you agree with the Israeli response to all of this?
I think it's very challenging. I think that there are many people who feel that Israel has a right to defend itself.
In this manner, though, children,
well, so the issue becomes about if this short-term strategy is going to create the peace that Israel wants long-term. And, the fact that we are back here for the third round in 5 years would indicate it's not necessarily giving Israel, supporters of Israel, what they want, which is a moderation to win out. And so, things like improving living standards, creating facts on the ground that make life, day-to-day life for the average Gazan civilian better and more hopeful are much more likely long-term to engender the peace and the moderation that we need.
So therefore the military action they're taking is not going to work?
I'm not sure the military action might work short-term in creating calm. It might stop the rockets. And Israeli civilians have a right to live without rockets sort of landing left, right and centre all over them day to day. Is it going to bring long-term peace? Are we not going to find ourselves back in the studio in 2 years' time having this conversation? I'm very unsure that it's going to do that. Because actually, if you look at the polling, which is incredibly interesting, of Gazans in June, big poll that was conducted of Gazan civilians in June, 73% said that they would back non-violent proposals that were put on the table, and 56% said that they would back a unity government with both Palestinian factions, which adopted a non-violent methodology towards Israel. I suspect if you were to go back and poll Gaza today, you'd find a radically different result, which is why I think that, you know, what we have to do is get people to think about the long term. That short-term military solutions, I am very doubtful that a short-term military solution,
which kills children,
is going to create a long-term peace, which everybody ultimately wants.
Okay, Hannah, thank you.
Thank you.